All right, everybody, let's dive into a topic that I think is absolutely fascinating. It's unpredictability. We've got a whole bunch of sources here, and we're really going to explore how stepping outside of what's expected can actually be powerful.
Oh, yeah.
It could even be a weapon. And I think this applies to all kinds of things like personal interactions or even strategic power plays.
It's interesting, isn't it? As humans, we really crave predictability.
We do.
We want to know what to expect because it gives us a sense of control. But when someone throws us a curveball, it can be really unsettling.
Oh, absolutely. Just like imagine you're in a chess match and you think you've got it all figured out. And then suddenly your opponent makes this move you didn't expect at all. Everything goes out the window. And
Exactly.
that's what we're going to dig into today using some really cool examples like Bobby Fischer's tactics in the '72 World Chess
Yeah.
Championship.
Yeah.
The guy was wild.
Yeah. And we're not just looking at chess. We're going to talk about Stonewall Jackson as well.
Yeah.
His military strategies during the Civil War, the guy was famous for keeping his enemies guessing.
It makes a huge difference, too. So let's start with the psychology behind all of this.
Yeah.
Our sources really emphasize that as humans, we're drawn to these patterns, these routines. We like to know what's coming next,
It's true.
whether it's our morning coffee or how someone's going to react in a situation.
Right. Because it's all about that feeling of control.
Exactly.
When you can predict what's going to happen, it reduces anxiety and we can navigate the world a little more smoothly.
But that's where it gets interesting because that reliance on predictability could actually make us vulnerable.
Absolutely. When that pattern's broken, we don't know what to do.
Right.
You can't rely on the usual scripts anymore, and that creates this sense of unease, maybe even fear.
Think about a time when someone you thought you knew really well did something that was totally out of character.
Yeah.
Remember that feeling of, whoa, what just happened? It can be a little panic-inducing.
Yeah, it's because our brains are constantly trying to make sense of the world.
Yeah.
And when someone behaves in a way we don't expect, it just disrupts that whole process. So then we're forced to kind of reassess. And that can be unsettling.
It really can be. Okay, so we've kind of established that we as humans crave that predictability.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we flip that script?
Mm-hmm.
How can we use unpredictability to our advantage?
Yeah.
Let's start with Bobby Fischer,
Okay.
the chess prodigy. But he was also known for this really eccentric behavior, especially during that 1972 World Championship against Spassky.
This was a huge deal, not just for the world of chess, but because it was happening at the height of the Cold War.
Oh, totally.
So there was so much at stake, and Fischer knew how to use that to his advantage.
He did.
Absolutely.
Leading up to the match, he made all these crazy demands, forfeited games, showed up late.
Yeah.
It's like he was messing with Spassky's head.
It was like psychological warfare.
It totally was.
And it worked, because Spassky was known for being so cool and collected. He just started to unravel under the pressure. He was trying to figure out what Fischer was going to do next, second-guessing himself constantly.
It's like Fischer understood that by being unpredictable, he could control the whole story of the match.
Yeah.
And he kept Spassky off balance.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big part of why Fischer won.
Absolutely. It's this classic example of using unpredictability as a weapon. He didn't follow expectations.
Yeah.
And that gave him this huge psychological advantage.
You really did.
It was decisive. It's a really good example. So what can we learn from Bobby Fischer and how he approached things? Unpredictability can really throw your opponent off their game. You don't always have to stick to the rules.
It's true. He kind of weaponized being eccentric.
He did.
Now, let's look at another example, Stonewall Jackson.
Yeah.
His Shenandoah Valley campaign during the Civil War. He used unpredictability to gain an advantage over those larger Union forces.
Oh, he was amazing. A master of deception. His movements were so fast, so unexpected, that the Union commanders never knew what he was going to do next.
Yeah, I read about that.
It was incredible.
They were always trying to figure him out. Like, he would spread misinformation on purpose, take unusual routes. He'd attack when they least expected it.
It's like he was playing a completely different game.
He was. And he did it so well.
By not playing by the rules, he created this chaos and confusion in the Union ranks.
Right.
And that psychological impact was just as important as his tactics.
It's fascinating how just being unpredictable can have that effect. It disrupts the enemy's decision-making process.
Yeah, they're forced to react instead of acting. It puts them on the defensive and they make more mistakes.
Okay, so we see how unpredictability can be this powerful tool in competitive situations, whether it's chess or a war. But what about in our everyday lives? Can we use these principles in our personal interactions? At work?
Absolutely. A bit of calculated unpredictability can be beneficial in all sorts of situations.
Really? Okay, I'm curious. What are some ways that we can inject some of that into our lives?
Well, one simple way is to break out of your routines. Do something unexpected, surprise the people around you.
So instead of taking the same route to work, I try a different one, even if it takes a little longer.
Exactly. Or try something new at your favorite restaurant.
Right?
Instead of always ordering the same thing, little things like that can shake things up a bit.
That's great.
It keeps things interesting.
I like that. What else?
Another thing you can do is to be strategic about the information you give out.
Okay.
Don't always be completely transparent.
Ooh, sneaky.
Hold back a little. Let people wonder what you're really thinking.
It's like creating a sense of mystery.
Yeah,
Like, what's he up to?
right, exactly. And that can be helpful in negotiations or when you need to keep things under control.
Okay, so it's not about being dishonest. It's more about choosing when to reveal things. Okay, that's good.
Hmm.
Now, isn't there a risk of taking it too far?
Hmm.
Where you're not just unpredictable, you're unreliable.
Oh, absolutely. It's like anything else, you can have too much of a good thing. You don't want to be so unpredictable that people don't trust you.
Right.
Because if no one can predict how you're going to act, it's tough to build a solid relationship.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So use it strategically. Our sources also talk about this thing called suspended terror.
Oh, yeah.
Can you explain that a bit?
Sure. It's the idea that by being unpredictable, you can kind of keep people on edge.
Oh,
They don't know what to expect.
right.
So they're always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
That is kind of intense, like psychological warfare.
It is. It's like walking on eggshells around you. They're
Yeah.
constantly second-guessing themselves, which is exhausting.
It's true. So are there any ethical considerations to using something like that?
Well, you definitely want to use it responsibly. I mean, it can be really effective, but it shouldn't be overused. You don't want to create an environment where everyone is afraid.
Right. It's more about gaining an advantage, not actually hurting anyone.
Exactly. But now our sources talk about this interesting counterpoint to suspended terror,
Oh.
and it's using predictability as a weapon.
Oh. So like reverse psychology.
Kind of. It's
Yeah.
where you establish a pattern of predictable behavior so your opponent gets comfortable. Then you break that pattern when it matters most.
You set a trap, they walk right in.
Exactly. And one of our sources talks about Filippo Maria Visconti. He was the Duke of Milan back in the 15th century.
Okay.
He was a brilliant strategist, and he used this tactic really well.
Visconti, the Duke of Milan, what did he do?
Well, he was known for being incredibly cunning. He'd create this aura of predictability,
Like-
almost to the point of boredom, so people would underestimate him. They thought they had him all figured out.
Oh, so they let their guard down.
Exactly. And then, bam, he'd make this totally unexpected move, and they'd be caught completely off guard.
Like, wait a minute. I thought I knew you.
Right. It was like they were walking right into his trap. He used predictability as a mask
Wow.
to lull his enemies into this false sense of security.
It's brilliant.
And because they were so used to his usual behavior, that sudden change was even more effective.
That's really interesting. It shows how our own expectations can be used against us.
Exactly. We get so used to what's familiar that we don't see the change coming. And that makes us vulnerable.
It's like we're lulled into this false sense of security by the predictability of everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
And then, bam, we're blindsided by something unexpected.
That's right. But this brings up another interesting point. Predictability, while it can be comforting, can also stifle our creativity.
Oh, I know that feeling. When I get stuck in a rut doing the same things day after day, my creative energy just disappears.
Yeah. It's like your brain needs that jolt of something new to get going again.
Exactly.
Our brains are wired to look for patterns, but that can stop us from thinking outside the box. When we're too focused on doing things the right way, the expected way, we miss out on new possibilities.
So how do we break free from that predictability trap? How do we get creative again? One of our sources talks about Picasso.
Oh yeah, Picasso was a great example. He was unpredictable, both in his art and his life.
Oh, yeah, he was.
He knew that to keep people interested, he had to break the rules.
He was always one step ahead of everyone.
He was a master of keeping the art world guessing. He knew that a little mystery goes a long way.
That's a good point. So maybe if we want to be more creative, we need to be a little less predictable.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to experiment. Improvise. Let the unexpected lead you to something new.
So when I start a creative project, I should be more open to new ideas, not just stick to the plan.
Yeah. Let go of that need to control everything. Allow yourself to make mistakes, to explore.
Like in jazz music, they
Exactly.
have a structure, but then they improvise. That's what makes it so interesting to listen to.
It's that spontaneity, that element of surprise that makes it captivating.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into unpredictability, the main takeaway is that a little bit of calculated chaos can be a good thing.
Yeah, whether it's for strategic advantage, personal growth, or creativity, it's about finding that balance between the familiar and the unknown.
It's been fascinating to see how one concept, unpredictability, can touch so many parts of our lives. Now, I want to leave our listeners with a question to think about. How could you add a little bit of calculated unpredictability to your own life? Where could it help? Where could it backfire?
That's a great question. In a world that can feel too predictable, a little bit of calculated chaos might be what we need to shake things up and reach our full potential.
That's it for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and don't be afraid of the unexpected.